Hello everyone, and welcome to lesson 3.6, which is on identifying equivalent expressions. This is our last lesson in chapter 3 before you take your chapter 3 quiz. And what this does in this lesson is it gets you to kind of put everything that we've learned in chapter 3 so far together, dealing with expressions, dealing with simplifying things, combining like terms, order of operations, distributive property, everything. So, when you have these, the way the problems are going to be set up is that they will give you an expression that needs to be simplified in some way. You will also be given several options at different expressions, and you have to tell which two expressions match up. The problem will match up with one of the options. An example of that is what's written in red on the screen. So 3/2 x plus 5x can be simplified into 3x plus 5 over 2. Now, the reason we can do that is because we have common denominators in the fractions. And so we know that the 3 and the 5 in the two fractions will go into the numerator. Just as a side note, if you ever have a variable, you can always write any variable, and I'll write this over here. If I had something like 4 over 7x, that is the same thing as me saying 4x over 7. It's just two different ways of saying the same thing. Even though that's never explicitly told to you, you can write those that way. So, now that we know that, 3/2 x can easily become 3x over 2, and 5 over 2 lets us combine those fractions into something different. So, where on one side we have 3/2 x plus 5/2, on the right side we have 3x plus 5 over 2. Those are two equivalent expressions because it is two ways of writing the exact same thing. So, with that being said, we're going to take a look at two examples here from the lessons, and I've also provided two options for us to see kind of what options will look like, as well as how do we handle solving these. Okay, so our first example here is 6 minus r times negative r. All right, so we know we have multiplication. We know we have that. If I wanted to rewrite this, I could rewrite it as negative r 6 minus r. It's kind of weird. But what we see is immediately we got a distributive property problem. And by using distributive property, we could have negative r times 6 minus negative r times r. So simplifying the first part, that's going to be negative 6r minus negative r squared. Again, let's pay attention to our negative negatives. So that's going to end up being negative 6r plus r squared. That's what we've gotten as our final answer. When we look at our two options here for A and B, we can see that option B is going to be our correct answer. Also, I want you to notice how close the two options for answers are. The first one is 6r plus r squared. The second one is negative 6r plus r squared. The options that they give you will be tricky like that, right? If this is to be the last lesson that summarizes everything we've learned in Chapter 3, then you have to be careful with negative signs and all of that, right? You have to make sure you're doing everything the right way because it is intentionally being tricky. And I know some of you don't want to hear that, but that is how any good set of multiple choice questions are worded. So be prepared. Okay, the second problem that we have is another distributive property problem, and we have 3 times 2 over 5x minus 1 over 2y. So, if I am to use distributive property, the 3 gets multiplied to both parts. Now, remember, just as a side note here, remember that 3 as a fraction is 3 over 1. So really what I'm being given here is 3 over 1 times 2 over 5x minus 3 over 1 times 1 over 2y. If we remember back from chapter 2 on how we handle multiplying fractions, all we have to do is multiply straight across. So 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 5x is 5x, minus 3 times 1 is 3. 1 times 2y is just 2y. So we get a final answer of 6 over 5x minus 3 over 2y. And here, that answer is A. We're not asked to do anything crazy. We're not asked to do anything special. But we are asked to remember things that we've done up to this point. So, anything that we have covered up to this point is fair game. Any combination of things that have been covered up to this point is fair game. You just have to be prepared and be able to simplify expressions on your own and match those up with one of the answers that are given. Once you're done with this section, you can go ahead and move on to the Chapter 3 quiz. Good luck with all that. Hopefully this has helped you out. If you have any questions on this section or even heading into the quiz, please let me know.